Have you ever done that thing where you go into a place like Sam's Club or Costco and you only have 4 things on your list and you walk out with an entire cart full? Hey guys, Bethany here with the next chapter, and today I'm going to do my April wrap-up. I already did one halfway through the month and I will link that above. And since then I've had time to read 3 other books. I didn't get to all the books that I wanted to this month, but you know, it happens. The first book that I read, I actually already did a review on. I liked it so well that I gave it its own book review, and it was called Talking to Strangers, and it's a nonfiction book, and it talks about how we as strangers tend to miscommunicate with each other and how we could be deceived by each other. It turns out that in general, people just don't act the way that we stereotypically expect them to, and that can lead to a lot of problems and a lot of misunderstandings. So definitely go check that one out. I'm not going to go into it too much here because I did do another review. But I really encourage you to read it if you are interested at all in psychology, human mind, and like reading like really interesting case studies. So go check that one out. The next one that I read this month, I had really high hopes for. I've seen it a lot on booktube and it sounded really interesting. It's called The Hazelwood. And it's about a girl whose grandmother had written a book of fairy tales. And the girl discovers after her grandma dies that it turns out that the fairy tales are real and from a real place. And then her mother gets kidnapped by people from this fairy tale land and she has to go and rescue her. Now, the premise of this sounded really interesting because I love fairy tale retellings and reimaginings, and so this sounded really cool. The Hazelwood had the vibe of like a dark Grimm's fairy tale, the original tellings versus, you know, the Disney version. But I could never really get into it. I felt like I spent the whole time like clawing, grasping for it, trying to, you know, catch hold of this story and to be really sucked into this world, and it just didn't happen for me. The author spent about half the book on stuff that I just didn't think she needed to spend that long on it. The last quarter of the book was by far the most interesting part of the book. And I think she could have taken what was in that last quarter and she could have written the entire book based on that. But instead, she spent all kinds of time on other stuff that I just didn't think was necessary and the best part of the story. So unfortunately, The Hazelwood was kind of a dud for me. The writing was good. It just didn't grab me. The final one that I read this month was called Liberty, and it started out with Liberty as a 12-year-old girl, and her mom are free blacks who live in New York, and her mom is a doctor, and Liberty helps her mom in the clinic. And her mom has big dreams for her, and after the Civil War, she is able to send Liberty to college so that Liberty can also become a doctor, and then they can run their clinic together. But then, as it turns out, Liberty's not really interested in being a doctor. That's not what speaks to her. And so she takes a different path, and she eventually marries a man who is from Haiti and moves back to Haiti with him in the hopes that she's going to be able to have her own freedom to make her own choices in her life. I ended up being disappointed in this book. It was billed as a coming-of-age story, and I didn't really feel like that was what I was given in this book. Liberty, she just wasn't as strong as a character as I thought that she would be. A lot of the choices that she made were because she didn't want to disappoint others in her life. Instead of being strong on her own and making decisions actively, decisions kind of came passively instead. And so she never really spoke to me as a character, and that really disappointed me. I really wanted to like this one. I don't know what happened this month. I had quite a few books that I ended up not liking, both in the beginning of the month and in the end of the month. It was kind of a dud month for me. Usually I like almost everything I read, so it was a surprise to me that I had several that just didn't go that way for me. Anyway, I hope that I will have better success in May. I'm excited for the ones that I'm going to be reading this next month. And as always, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss what's happening in the next chapter. Thanks for watching.